This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Forge Daily. I'm your host, Mackenzie Barwell, coming to you on April 29th, 2024. We are now in week 4 of the CPL season, so there's a lot to talk about because we're coming off a game day against Valour, and now Forge FC will face off against York United for the first round of the Canadian Championship. Today, I am joined by Steve Milton, and we got into all of those things. If you saw the last episode that he and I did together, you'd know that he has a wealth of knowledge, and he's willing to share all of it. So let's just get right into today's episode and my conversation with Milty. All right, Milty, we're live for the second time. Thanks again for joining me on the audio network in our personalized episode of Forge Daily.
Right. It's great to be here, Mackenzie, of course. I think we got off to a good start, and we're going to be doing this, I think, all year. It sure looks like.
I know. Yeah, so. I'm pumped, and I feel like we're not going to have a ton of opportunities to talk about a match that went down on Saturday and then an upcoming one on Wednesday.
That's right, and then it won the following week too. So it's a bit of a sandwich here right now. And can you already believe it? They've already got three games in and 9 points.
Yeah, exactly. That's the most important part. But you're totally right. We've got another one coming up this weekend. But before that, Canadian Championship. So I do eventually want to get to that York and Forge game. But first, let's just do some brief reminiscing on the home match against Valour, because obviously they came away with that 2-1 win, but at times it looked like it could go either way. So what were your thoughts and main takeaways from that one?
Well, I agreed with what Valour coach Philip Sansato said after the game, that he felt that they probably deserved to come away with a point on the road, which would have made them very happy. And of course, they go home empty, and that's the way the game is. And I thought there was an argument there. The Forge, they kept saying they wouldn't do this, but to me, I don't know about you, Mac, but it looked a little bit to me like they might have been playing the very thing Bobby didn't want them to do. I thought they might have been playing through this game just a little bit at first, because it's a team they should beat. They knew that Valour was on the road, 8 straight games on the road while they fixed the turf at their home stadium. They knew that they had been struggling, Valour, a little bit, and not a little bit, a lot, and especially in the second halves. And I don't think they maybe jumped on them early enough. And I thought they were quite, they squandered a bit in the first half, a little bit. And they came alive in the second half. They got way more talent. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. And so I think two really good things happened there, Mac. And I'd like your opinion on this. But the guys came through as they always did, which was really great. And there was such a back and forth symbiotic relationship between them and their goalkeeper, Chris Kalongo. That was very, very important. But they also played, I'd say, made some mistakes, like looking through maybe towards the Canadian Championships. And that's the kind of thing they don't want to do. And it's definitely what they don't want to do in the Canadian Championships, try and figure they've already won that. And yet they still won. So enough to get a scare to say, whoa, let's not do that again. As a coaching technique, as a teaching technique for, say, somebody like on-field coach like Bex or Alex Ashinodi Janssen, those are important things, because you can remind players that here's what's happened. We left that one a little too open.
Yeah, a little up to chance. They were lucky that Noah Jensen came on absolutely firing.
Yeah.
More than one chance from outside the 18-yard box. But you're so right, Milty. I agree to your point, especially toward the beginning of the match. Alex has talked about this too, and it's one of the biggest things that those core guys keep in mind is not being, complacent and assuming a win, especially over a team like Valour. I got to give them credit because they came out strong, and I think there is something to prove on their side.
On Valour side or on yes, I agree.
Side, like you said, they've kind of. Well, they haven't really shown out, and I think they're constantly trying to prove something, especially against a team like Forge. That's totally the way that they're going to want to do it.
Well, there's no doubt. And these were, as we talked before, the two original teams in the league, right? The first two named, the first ownership groups named. And, I thought their keeper played extremely well, and we overlooked that they he made some great saves too. I would say Kalongo probably made the greater saves and the more timely saves at key moments, and of course Jordan Faria was just outstanding. The Forge left side had a little trouble handling him, particularly in the first 60. They had to substitute him eventually because he was running all over the place. But he was just terrific. He I thought he was among the best 2 or 3 players on the pitch.
Yeah, and to the point you made earlier about Valour wanting or feeling as though they deserve to come away with a point.
Right.
It's unsurprising. I actually spoke to one of the physios. Brian came outside of the locker room after the game was done, and I was standing in the tunnel. And I said, Brian, what's going on in there? Because these players aren't coming back into the locker room, beaming with smiles. It didn't look like they were happy or content necessarily with their performance. And he said, yeah, to be fair, the coaching staff of Forge is definitely not one to make any big speeches after a game. In fact, they keep it to a minimum. But they said they're more than happy to come away with the 3 points, but they could have easily walked away with 1.
Well, they could have, and those 3 points, those extra 2 points are really, really important. First of all, they're the only team that's got 9 points now. Everybody's had a couple of games. They're the only ones that have 9. The Atletico, I think, has 7, and who else is up there?
I just looked at this
Pacific.
too.
Yeah, I think Pacific has 7 as well, and Vancouver's now down to 6 because they got beaten by York, and we'll get around to that a little bit later in the show. But that's really, really important for a number of reasons. It gives you a little bit of a. I mean, first of all, it's never happened. A, they'd never won the first game. B, they'd never won 2 games in a row. 3, they've never won 3 games in a row to start the season. So, it always ends up well for them. But they've set this kind of bar high. They're playing against 3 teams that were struggling, and you've got to put them away. And now they're going to play York, who really got a real sniff of life by beating Vancouver on Friday night. I mean, not just beating them, really handling them, and they'll feel pretty good coming in here. But when you have that, when you get those 9 points up, it allows you, as time and some of the veterans get tired and all of those kinds. They started the same 11 every time. I'm suspecting, depending on who else might have been nicked in the game, they'll come close to starting the same 11 on Wednesday night. I think in the Canadian Championship, but it allows them to eventually work players into the game. Like especially some of the younger players. And we saw that. I mean, a younger player set up Noah at the end.
Amadou Kone, I know. What a performance from him. Especially taking advantage of those few minutes he had in the game.
Oh, he really took advantage. I mean, I watched him in practice and I knew he could run. But this was, he left those guys in the dirt. And he got the ball over. And Noah had a pretty good story there. They said to somebody on the bench, he said, if I get into this, if I get into the game and I score, I'm going to take my shirt off, which of course is a yellow card. And he was just saying it. That's like locker room talk almost. Well, it happened. Totally. He says, I've had to live up to it. So I had to live off. So he whips his shirt off, and you can't be, that's against the rules to be seen running around in your sports bra, and he took the yellow, and he was a bit sheepish about it, but he said, I had to live up to my word. I thought it was pretty funny.
Well, yeah, I told him after, you did that no hesitation. And to be honest, it's pretty out of character for Noah. I don't really take him as a guy to do the jersey swing after a goal. He's pretty, reserved to an extent, so much so that he probably wouldn't do that. And I said, why did you do that with such conviction?
That's great. It was conviction. There was no, and that's the conviction, was that he made the promise to a teammate, and I can't remember exactly who. That he made it to. The other thing is, let's not forget this, and he brought this up himself afterwards, just privately talking to a couple of people in the media scrum. Or after the media scrum, he said that remember, he hadn't scored a goal since April 17th. He remembered the exact date. That's 1 year and 10 days. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine what that must have felt like to him. So and so all of those things combined, of course, and the fact that it was the 90th minute as well.
Yes.
And here they go, Forge again. And I mean, how many points have they rescued in this stadium here in the final, I don't know, 10, 12, not even that, 6, 7 minutes of the games, going way back, including overtime last year, or extra time last year. So and of course that brings the fans back. Not that there were, it wasn't the biggest crowd because of the weather was threatening, and in other parts of the city it was horrible. I mean, really windy and really, at the stadium it was gorgeous by the time the game started. It was probably the best 4 hours of the weekend.
Totally, yeah. And it didn't look that promising during the warm-up, so I'm glad it opened up.
You walk uptown, Mac, and so a lot of people will make their decision that morning on whether they're going to go. And if you happen to be out in Ancaster and it's pouring rain, you don't even bother to see, is it raining at the stadium?
Yeah.
So,
well, I want to rewind quickly. First of all, crazy that Noah knew to the date the last time that he scored. There's no wonder he kind of came in hungry.
Yeah.
But you also talked about this team winning 3 games in a row, them never having won that opening match at home. And I just want to go back to last year when we were having similar conversations, maybe not quite so early on in the season, but they did have one of, if not the best start, I think, in club history. But then they also proceeded to go on and go into a little dry spell for about a month. I would say toward the end of the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is, how do they continue this momentum and ensure that that kind of narrative doesn't unfold again?
By listening to their leaders, but not just listening to them, but actively listening to them. And actually, the leadership core is huge on this team now because there's so many people coming back and people are starting to develop into leadership. The number one thing is avoiding injury to key players. I mean, they have the depth to absorb. Well, we've seen it. Dom didn't play last game. Noah's been out. Garvin, a number of other people have been out. We don't. I'm not sure who might have come out of this with nicks and bruises out of Saturday. That's the number one thing. But secondly is to just keep the pedal to the metal and understand really how long is a game. It's 90 minutes out of your life. So give every second of that. And they do. This club has never really had a problem with that. This is not a problem generally of effort on this team. But sometimes they can maybe fall back on their talent a little bit too much. And that's why big lesson coming out of this last weekend was that. I don't want to use the word lucky because they're too good you make your own luck. I mean, they got down to the other end. That wasn't lucky. I mean, that was based on skill and some good defending and those kinds of things. But there were some teaching points there. Don't do that. So keep, and when teams, and they've got another one coming in on Wednesday night. When teams clearly aren't as good as you, at least top to bottom through the 23 men, then you have to remind them why you've been in 5 finals and they have not, and why that if things go accordingly, you're going to be tough to win this game, particularly against teams in the bottom third tier. And right now, York's trying to make a move out of there, but that's where York is in their bottom, and Valour's in the bottom tier, and Halifax is in the bottom tier, and they play them next week. It's supposed to play them next week in the school day game. So you've got to really, as we said in the printed column earlier this week for Forge, you got to make hay when the sun shines, right? And the sun is shining right now when you're playing against the teams that maybe aren't expected to do well. Just make sure that they don't. And I think you get that going, and then you set a standard for yourself that you can draw back upon, and then you can rotate people through. I mean, they are rotating people through. That's when, look at what the substitutes did. A substitute made a defensive play. The substitute brought the ball up. The substitute scored the goal. And a substitute distracted the goaltender slightly, the goalkeeper slightly on the play. I don't think he was looking at Jordan Hamilton, but he knew he was there. The goaltender knew he was there, and I think
still that presence in the box too. You're going to have one eye on him.
He was looking at. I know he noticed him out of the corner of his eye. Now he should have probably made the save, but it was a bit of a deflection there, and you probably have to hang on to it. And if you're tiniest bit distracted by another player, and I thought Jordan did a great job there, stayed onside, and also, just let him know he was there. He was there for the rebound. So now you got to know, not only do I have to stop this thing, I got to corral it.
Yeah.
Corral it. So now you're thinking for sure I got to catch it. Well, you don't do either. So
lucky enough for Noah Jensen, he puts enough on the back of it. So.
That's right. Yeah. So and then of course they'd come away with a bit of a bad break when the shot from the spot went off the post, right? So
yes,
from Benny, right? So
it'll be interesting to see, as you said, what the starting 11 looks like on Wednesday. I know Malik took a knock and came off halftime, so TBD to see where he's at. I think it was a hamstring.
Yeah, I think it was something like that. Yeah, he sort of got hidden from behind. I think somebody put a knee into him just above his knee, and it kind of locked his knee and hit the hamstring. It was a tough situation. Boy, the way he started, you don't want any loss of momentum there. I don't think the team would have a particular loss of momentum. I'm talking about him personally. I don't think the team would have a loss of momentum because at some point here, and I don't know if it'll be this game, but Dom's ready to go again. And take a look at something else there very suddenly on that back line, Mac. Alex is so far ahead of anybody else in passes completed. And, most of those, of course, would come from backfielders because they're the ones that have to get the ball up. But he is, I think he's got 220 passes already. I don't think passes. And I think the next one's 195 in the league. And that's over 2 games, like a 20 pass lead kind of thing. So that tells you a couple of things. It tells you there's been some loose balls in the box, right? Because your defenders had to pick them up. It also tells you who he is. Just who he is. And when he makes a mistake, any of those backliners make a mistake, it's pretty obvious. And the only person more obvious is the keeper when a mistake is made. And what I love about him is that if he does make one, man, he comes back with a vengeance. I don't want to be the person handling the ball after Alex makes what he perceives as a mistake for himself. And he hasn't played fully healthy either. So we haven't seen him fully healthy yet. Let's see what happens when he gets in, full condition, for the thing. So that's part of it. And I think one of the other things that happened going back to Saturday, and we should probably look more ahead now, but, a couple of things. The ball bounces off the post, and what looked like, okay, this is the winning, and the guy who's played so well all year. I mean, Benny's been fabulous, and gets one off the post, and you think, that's not good, but they come back and they get a goal. And soon after Tristan scored the opening goal, Valour scored within 4 minutes or something like that, and that's the kind of thing that you go, well, you could have a 1-1 draw here, and but no, they weren't going to settle for that, and
those are the moments where that complacency, I think, can kind of sneak in, but you saw that mental shift, and
it could, again, that's where this club's pretty dominant that way. They know that they've got. Exactly. But the problem, that's a really thin line here. You don't want to go over it and say, well, our skill will make sure that we get it. And that's the other problem with maybe winning too many games late, is you maybe could start depending on that. But they got too many angry leaders to make that, to not make that happen.
It's more than just skill.
Yeah, but you can't just turn that switch on. You really can't. There are times when you can't do it, especially in big games. And this is a big game on Wednesday, no matter who the opposition is. Huge.
And, there's a few things. There's a few things I want to say there. First of all, the coaches clinic happened yesterday. And one of the things that Coach Bobby talked about was the importance of every single player on the team, and how every single player will get the same experience out of practice, no matter their level, no matter if they're a Kyle Becker or Zane Bruno fresh out of Sigma. And I think that's when it kind of clicked for me, that not only are they bringing in such talented players, but this is how they maintain their depth, through training, through
identification is a big part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why, there are so many players who can come into this back line and make an impact, or the attack for that matter. But yeah, that's just something that happened during the coaches clinic. It was fantastic. It was a great turnout. But
Yeah, and it's a good thing for coaches to know that. I happened to see a bit of the League One game with Hamilton United, and don't forget about them. That eventually they're there's an affiliation there that they're working with them, and then Kid is working with all the regional teams here to develop. and
totally,
and it's not just developing local players; it's making sure you're the ones that know about them, so that when draft comes or they don't get drafted, you'll sign them because you've worked really, really hard and you trust the coaching they're getting because of the kind of thing that they're doing. This is good for soccer. Forge isn't the only one. I think they're doing it by far more extensively than anybody else. Surprisingly, Cavalry's not surprisingly, I should say, Cavalry also does a lot of that. And York is talking. No, not yet. They just bought the team. The owners just bought the team, but York, in the long run, wants to see almost every player on their team who is a non-import, a non-foreign player, come from the area that they're in. So they're familiar with York. They've been identified with York. They bring fans with them because they've grown up in the area, and they're from the richest soccer. I mean, Montreal, Quebec, and a few other places in Quebec are great producers of players too. But it's really, if you took it, the balance of them are in from the GTA now, and you want those players to want to play for York, to come to the academy and develop the way. And I would say that the template, you'll do it a little differently because you're not the Smyrna Altissus. You don't have a long-standing thing in Sigma, but they want to develop something like that. And I talked to him. I'll write about it today. People can read about it on tomorrow's on the website. That you really want that, and you want that from a team that's going to be your rival. Hopefully that they can become a rival more than just a rival that's just down the road. You want them to be a rival in real terms.
Yeah, and through those developmental streams as well.
All right. And they've got a long-term plan.
It's very exciting, and you want, as you said, players to have opportunities to come into the CPL and be excited about that and want that to be the goal, because now this is kind of a good segue to the Canadian Championship. Yeah. There are so many other, that it's going to be good competition within the league, but also cup competitions like the Canadian Championship where teams you're familiar with, like TFC, CF Montreal, like these are the players that you want to be competing against.
Yeah.
So outside of this matchup, which we'll talk about, why is it so important that this tournament exists, and what do you think it does for the Canadian Premier League?
Well, for one thing, it's hard for non-heavy soccer fans. I mean, soccer fans have no trouble figuring out what all these different competitions are: CONCACAF Cup, the Cup League, the Canadian Championships, the Shield, and the Playoff Shield. That's 4 championships at once, and that's on our website today too, analyzing all that. And we chose the best person you could ever get to analyze that for us, and that's David Edgar, because he's been involved in it in Europe. He grew up as a fan, trying to because he lived in Europe from the time he was 14 years old to pursue his career. He's played in it. He's played in it on several different things, and managing to keep those things. They're all important. And a lot of non-soccer fans don't understand how important each of those championships is, and that they are separate. But soccer players do. And York, every player on that team is a career soccer player. Since they were little boys, they understand this. They understand that form, and Eddie uses a great thing here, form goes out the window in a single elimination championship. And that's what this is to start with. Then it goes to doubles. And York senses something here that there was a bit of a template from what Valour did the other day. Put a lot of balls in the box and see what happens. Long balls. They threw a lot of long balls up there, and Bobby called it the second shots, hoping for a second opportunity. And that's where, of course, the back 4 are very important. Don't let them get that second opportunity. Challenge them a little more than you did in the first half. But that template's there. So York, a lot of teams try that against Forge, and it doesn't work. Because Forge, what happens then is if they get a stop, they get the quick break the other way with numbers, and you know how dynamite they are on the outside with their outside shooters.
Yeah.
So it's very important to York at the moment, but I think it's even more important to Forge, and here's why: because the winner gets to play CF Montreal, right? And there's history there. serious, serious history.
Serious history.
They really want a shot at this. So again, I think they're in a situation. We do this thing on our social media accounts where 3 keys to the game.
Yeah.
And I choose them. And number 1 is do not think through this game. Be in the present. And that's what I thought maybe they didn't do in the first half against Valour. Again, good example, good time to have it against a team that you came back to beat. So it scared you, and you understand that you better think that. Now they played an absolute one of the most complete games I've ever seen Forge play was in York 11 days ago. But that was a league thing. That was a whole different thing. York played well for only 10 minutes, and then Forge just completely took over, and the score flattered actually York. But York is working a great number of new players into the game, into their lineup. The Mexican players, the 3 Mexican players in particular, all of them from Monterrey, and those players, I think, are starting to feel a little bit more at home. So that's something that gives York some impetus there and some hope. And I think you can never, ever count out Mo Babouli, the team captain. Everybody knows him here. He's a gorgeous player to watch. He looked like he was playing a bit alone last time they played. But they scored 3 goals, 2 from Brian Wright. I mean, he's not really the guy to watch, but you got to watch it because there were balls in the box, right? And
finish.
Yeah. So one of them was a tap in, but he was there. He was in the right position. He read it. So tap ins to me, I never poo-poo them the way that other people poo-poo them, because you have to be there. As I say, you have to be in the right position to be in the right position. Right? So, and
it kind of goes back to what you were saying about luck. You don't get to the other side by chance, or
that's right. You
create the goal line by chance.
You create your own luck. My daughter has that up for her young daughters. There's a big poster in their house. You create your own luck. And she wants that to be a life lesson to them. And I think it's it's a lesson on and off the pitch. So
absolutely. Yeah, Milt, you briefly talked about it there too, but now you're coming in with more momentum potentially off a 3-0 win against Vancouver. So what are you seeing from them this time around? I know this is exactly how we closed out the last episode, but if you could just kind of touch on maybe what we wouldn't have about 11 days ago.
Oh, when they were going into there. Yeah. Well, for one thing, again, they're starting to solidify more, but let's not make any mistakes here. Forge is a better team. And what I see is when you are the better team, you have to remind the other team of that right away. You have to say, yeah, you guys might think you're on the way here, but remember who we are? Remember exactly who we are? Remember all the trouble you have with our last game with out on the left side, was first with the right side with Tristan and David Chouanière. They just drove, they made him dizzy on that one side of it, and then they switched to the other side. They went up the other side. And Betty went up on that side, and 2 or 3 others followed in that little slipstream that Benny would create, and do that. And that's what they did in York. Once York had their little flurry at the start of the game, I think Malik made a couple of good clears, and I think Chris made one save in there that helped them out. And then Forge said, "Okay, enough of this." That's what you have to do. That is their template here. When you play a team that isn't as good as you always try to remind them why they aren't. And that's now, and you can't. I mean, the real reason they're better than most teams is because of what can happen when you start substituting players is the depth. You have to remind them your starting 11 is also better. At least you feel it is than they are, because you don't want them to think, "Hey, we're as good as these guys," because they're good players too. They got some really good players on that team, and they may eventually. I don't think they'll be in the running, but I think they'll be. I don't know that they're going to finish in the bottom third. Where they finished most of the time ever since their first year, not counting the first year. At the end of the first year, they were third in the second half of the season, but it didn't matter then because you had to be top 2.
Well, yeah, there's a reason Forge needs to come out with some urgency and kind of come hot out the gate, as you said.
And don't make Chris make all those saves so early. I mean, how many did he make, Mac? How many great ones did he make in that game?
I I don't know.
3 or 4 maybe, including 2
I
at
was
the
gonna
end that
say
were inexcusable that
yeah,
they had to be made.
he made 3 against Valour that were
Yeah.
unreal, and a
Yeah.
similar number as you said
Yeah.
against
Well,
York.
that's one of I meant the Valour game. Sorry, I didn't mean York.
Oh, yes, 3. Yeah.
I speak in tongues, so.
But
Okay.
I know that because KJ on his way in, Chris and Jack asked Chris what his favorite save was out of the 3 against Valour, and he said the one where he had to jump back and like push it over the crossbar.
It was a brilliant strike, and it was a brilliant save. That was a great football play, top to bottom, and that's why I love watching this league. There's a lot of that. It opened up. It was back and forth there for a while. It looked a bit like river hockey, what we call ice
Yeah.
hockey, river hockey. It's sort of coach is nuts, but if you gamble, you're going to pay the price on both sides, right? So the goalkeeping has to be ready, and you could go all game and not have a quality chance against you, and then there's that one because you have your own players haven't scored enough, so now you're up only 1-0, and you're into the 90th minute, and for the first time you see this bullet from 4 feet away.
Yeah, that's another thing too that we were talking about there. Dom came into the conversation and he said when they're in a leading position, that's when they are most confident. That's when they play their best, obviously. But he said, if we can score one, preferably 2 within the first 45 minutes of a game, we have too much quality to lose. KJ gave us a stat. This team has never lost a game when they start winning from leading position. And he said that's his favorite stat.
AJ, I don't know that I knew that stat. Beautiful. It's not just talent on that. Well, it is talent because it relates to the next thing I'm going to say is they play a possession game. So if you're up and the other team can't get the ball,
yeah.
All right. Now it's down to you making a mistake. So who's going to beat you when you're up 2-0? The only team that can beat you is you, if you're them, if you happen to be Forge, and Forge has beaten themselves occasionally in the past. Not very rare. I mean, they don't lose many games. I mean, it's pretty amazing their record. And it's still in this city. Not everybody understands what a dominant. This is one of the most dominant teams that's ever played professional sport in this history. Perhaps the most dominant one.
Let's close it out there. I feel like that's a great transition into Wednesday. Thank you so much again, Milty. I feel like we covered a lot today, and I'm excited to do this exact same thing after the match on Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll have a look at it. And are we doing it later this week, or are we going to do it next week? Do we know yet?
We're doing every post game, so I think
maybe the next day. So we'll be doing it on
Thursday.
On Thursday, yeah. Please.
Yeah.
Back in Milty show.
Wait, that's kind of good. M&M. Okay, I'm going to stop.
All right. Okay, Mac.
Okay, that's all for today's episode. Maybe I will make some changes to the title of this show. Mac and Milty has a little bit of a ring to it, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, you can expect a lot more on the audio network coming soon. More episodes of Max Access, Behind the Beard, Season 2. I'm so excited. And, of course, the Captain's Log as well. It's going to be an exciting couple months. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will be back to check in on the audio network very shortly.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.